Whoa, we're back for some Bleach Soul Resonance. And I do want to talk about one thing, because I've basically spent a lot of time talking about if you're someone who might want to skip Mayuri, what are the benefits of doing so? And I want to dedicate this video instead to talking about the upsides of pulling for Mayuri, because I think that is equally, if not more important, for people starting the game, for people who started the game during the Nell patch, for people who pulled for Nell, and for people who want to build their account wide rather than build their account sort of like tall, right? And what do I mean by tall versus wide? Building a wide account means I want to get at least one of every character. You see, I want to get one of every character who comes out, and I don't care if I don't end up getting things like dupes, right? Building account building account tall rather means investing in things like character boundaries. Even as a free-to-play, these aren't like impossible things to get. If you're building your account really tall, you might be someone who saves until you see like one of your favorite characters and you actually just pull for like their dupe 4 or something, you know, one of those really obscene dupes that, you know, really changes how much a character can output. But what is the benefit, or I guess what are the parameters first that we fall under when it comes to pulling? So I'm not going to press this button, because if I press this button down here, it'll pull with my tickets, but it costs 1600 to flatly pull for a character. So if we go here, it costs 160 for a ticket, 160 times 10, 1600. 1600 8 times to get to pity would be 12,800, I believe. You can check my math on that. You know, that's just off the top of the head. So 12,800. That doesn't count if you've been pulling for a bit. If you're, you know, more of a long-term player, that means you essentially get a ticket back every single time you get a dupe that you can't use. So if we go to the advanced ticket exchange here, I actually put just now 4 tickets into this, so now I've got about 15 tickets right total. So that'll lessen the burden by a substantial amount. That 12,800 might go down to, you know, 9,600 or 8,000 and something. You know what I mean? Like these numbers become less and less. That doesn't, of course, count the 40 pity for limited stamp here, which is another factor, and I would assume that Mayuri stamp will be very much worth getting, because they all tend to be very much worth getting. But that gives us a benchmark, right? So anywhere close to about 12,000 is we could expect. We know that we're getting about 8,000 rewards minimum throughout this event, which means that I could go into this event thinking, okay, I've got 16,000 Jade to play around with. No matter what, I've got about 16,000 Jade to play around with during the course of this event, which means that assuming Soifon has a similar amount of rewards, which all of the releases have had a pretty similar run of rewards, it means I could technically afford to pull for Mayuri. And like I said, my issue is that I make content for the game, right? So for me to skip a character means I have one less character to sort of make content around, right? So it's especially draining as someone who's playing free to play, you know, trying to keep my account as free to play as possible. That way I can continue to make you know, these free to play opinions, right? So you can see I don't have anything here. Another thing I want to start speaking to, like the benefits of pulling Mayuri. So let's say you want Mayuri now, then you've got a fair bit of currency saved up and you've decided I want him no matter what. I want to build my account wide. Mayuri is a very good character for that, because according to them, he will be a character that works without dupes essentially at all, right? If that's the case, then I would compare him to a character like Yodahara, who doesn't need much to get off the floor. Now, look at Yodahara's stat spread. My Yodahara has essentially no attack, essentially no crit, all in on crit damage, all in on ultimate charge rate. The rest completely vapid. Terrible gear, right? So as I go through here, the only thing I'm hitting is this crit damage. I could easily get this more as well. Like easily, I could farm for more. I could continue to like fish, but the thing I've realized is, what does that do? You know what I mean? Like I already have like a huge amount of crit damage. You know, I could farm for a crit damage piece. It's like crit damage main and crit damage substat. Like this one right here. I could put effort into that, right? and that would be a bonus, right? It would be a bonus. I got ultimate charge here. I could look through here. Double ultimate charge right here could be one I go back to. I've gotten a piece here with like a little bit of crit damage too. But yeah, besides exactly this piece right here, none of these are really too interesting, right? None of these are too interesting to me. I think this will be a piece that, you know, let's just do this in front of you. Let's see if we hit. But this would be another thing that is sort of like beneficial to Mayuri probably, is because we hit HP. Whoopie-doo. This doesn't really matter because we got crit damage there. So immediately that this piece that I just hit is an upgrade for this piece, because all this piece has is crit damage main stat. The attack percent literally doesn't matter. None of these other stats matter. Whereas if I had level 30 this piece, I'm gonna get crit damage and the same amount of ult recharge rates. All right, so let's just do it. Let's do it in front of you. But what this means, is that Mayuri is probably going to have an extremely easy time finding gear, which is going to severely lessen the burden of, you know, the burden of gearing these characters. I guess I'll keep this. I mean, I don't really need to. Who cares? It's going to severely lessen the burden of building these characters. So now we're up to 215% crit damage, 153% ultimate charge rate, right? It happens that fast because they're only looking for 2 stats. That's like a little example. You see how easy it is to gear characters when you aren't looking for, you know, slash damage bonus. Also, he wants a little bit of ailment. Also, he wants a little bit of crit rate. Also, he wants a little bit of attack percent. You know, crit rate percent. He wants crit damage. He wants crit rate. He wants attack percent. So he wants a double crit modifier plus the damage modifier plus you know what I mean? Like, just over and over. That is a thing that is going to be extremely nice about getting a character like Mayuri, is the conditions for actually getting these characters kitted is going to allow you to save much more come the time they drop like a Suifon, right? So if you're playing with a bunch of extra resources, like, you're not really going to need to dip into your imaginary fragments so much. Maybe you can go back and try to min-max a character like Nelel, whose gear you're not too happy with, or Gin, whose gear you're not too happy with, or, you know, Kenpachi, or whoever you decide to pull for you're not too happy with, because you're going to be spending very little ultimately to get the most out of your character, like a Yudahara, like a Mayuri. And we're actually going to go over to the details for Mayuri just for a little bit, because I do want to talk about how like his official kit has essentially been revealed, so we know what he's getting. So as we move over here, we see they officially revealed some parts of Mayuri's kit, and all I can say is goodbye. Kisuke, by the way, this is also courtesy of Giku. So if you're looking for an English Bleach Soul Resonance news account, most of the viewers I have based on YouTube analytics say that, you know, most of my viewers are following Giku, so you don't need to hear me say this, but just in case some of you aren't, you can find the, you know, unofficial, official Bleach Soul Resonance news account here. And what we're going to go down to is that, one, he has healing, which seems to be very suspicious because we've now gotten healing on the last 2 characters. We also have a character like Orihime who heals. And that's sort of interesting because we have no content at all where healing is a necessity. So to get 2 characters that heal and 1 character who was on release that heals does make us quirk a brow, right? I mean, Orihime literally has the ability to revive characters. He has an increased damage here. He has reduced spiritual pressure here, which is going to be... This is going to be pretty massive. Why is this going to be pretty massive? It's because when you're building teams, one of the things you're really looking to do is optimize how much spiritual pressure damage you do to the enemy. So, sorry, let's say, you know, you're playing in one of these like towers or something, you know, one of these things where you need to actually like blitz down damage. The issue is that as you get more and more up here, it's hard to like break these characters without matching element, without doing damage. You'll see a lot of times that you know, whales with boundary 6 characters, they'll just insta break a character, right? Free to plays don't really have this option as much, and I think a lot of it comes down to it's going to come down to actually abiding by the parameters of the stage, right? Abiding by whatever the element typing is, and it makes it much easier to actually reach these thresholds. If Mayuri is just saying, hey, I don't have the element typing, but I literally just tell you to lower your spiritual pressure, that's going to be pretty huge. And again, accept your punishment here, which is super gift. also does the same thing while applying whatever this hit poison value is, right? And giving like increased damage. So he's probably going to be a character who mostly wants to just use it when his spiritual pressure is full, which also probably means that he's not going to be a character that's very demanding on time, on field. He'll just kind of chill in the back, most likely until this is filled. You bring him out, you pop it, you get a big damage buff to essentially everything. You know, maybe you break him here, maybe you apply increased damage here and poison, and now he's spiritually broken. Your DPS comes in, boom, they get obliterated, right? We have the ultimate, which is lowering enemies' ailment damage resistance, which is going to be massive for not only characters like Nellel, not only characters like Gin, but characters like Kenpachi even, right? Characters who sort of specialize in dealing these big chunks of damage. Characters like Grimjaw, who we suspect during the half Annie is going to be an ailment character. And a lot of people are like, well, why are they putting out so many ailment characters? It's like, I get it. It kind of doesn't matter. However characters do their damage, we're not far enough into the game where we're like, you know, we're 10 years into Dokkan Battle and they're still putting out like the same type of character. You know, that's not what's happening. They need to sort of fill out these archetypes. And while it seems like ailment is getting a lot in a row, ultimately there's going to be a shift, right? They're going to finish the ailment stuff and then they're going to move on to doing other things. Like, that's just, it feels extra oppressive because we have so few limited characters in the game. So every limited like is a major thing, right? There will become a time where you're playing this game maybe a year from now, if you are still playing this game a year from now, where we're gonna get like an ailment character. You're gonna be like, I don't want an ailment character, I'm just gonna skip, right? But because we're so early on, it does like feel like, oh my god, ailment again. But these characters are so good, it shouldn't really matter. We also seem to understand that he'll be granting a bit off of his damage or his ult cooldown, though I guess we can't see that here anyway. But he is getting a ultimate charge efficiency and an ailment damage efficiency, and each time it triggers ailment damage to teammates, crit damage increase for 15 seconds. This is pretty crazy. Like, again, crit rate support is no joke, and while it means that he won't be as good with like, you know, like a Bankai Ichigo or something, it means he will be good directly with a Kenpachi or a Gin. And I think a big thing is like, so let's go to my Gin, for example. So one reason that I could see myself trying to pull this Mayuri is because my Gin has 39.5% crit rate. 39.5% crit rate means that when my Gin gets his 15% crit rate from his weapon stamp, he goes up to, what is it, 54%? If this character gives Gin another 15% crit rate, I immediately go 15%, yeah, 15. I immediately go from 39.5% to 70%, essentially. That is huge. 70% is probably my cutoff. So you can see that Kenpachi here is 67%. That doesn't actually count the fact that he's going to get, you know, 2 stacks of 10%, so 20% more. So we go back to Kenpachi here. That doesn't count that he's going to essentially go up to 87%, right? It's huge. Huge, right? Huge. For my Kenpachi, that might mean that Yodahara is just the objectively better character for my Kenpachi, because I would rather just give him crit damage bonuses, right? But for a character like my Gin, who is much lower, for a character that you might have that, you know, like for a character like my Toshido, who is really struggling to acquire any sort of meaningful crit rate because I do not have his weapon, I do not have his boundary, giving crit rate support reminds me of when I put Yachiru in. And if you guys don't remember, I was doing tests around the time that Kenpachi released, where, and obviously Yachiru specifically buffs Kenpachi, so there is that to take into account. But before my Kenpachi really got solid, before I got Boundary 1, before I really got anything, I was doing tests with Yachiru, and she was providing better support to my Kenpachi, who at the time only had like a 50% chance to crit. And if you don't have about a 65 to 70% chance to crit, that crit rate essentially doesn't mean anything. You really need crit rate before you can even start talking about crit damage. That then brings up characters like Nellel, where it's like, okay, well now I have crit rate, but I couldn't get any crit damage on any of my pieces. Well, Nellel is giving 80%, right? if you have her boundary 2. This is where it starts to sort of stack on top of each other. So if you have Nellel and you have Mayuri, then characters like Gin gain all of these stats that they're unable to get otherwise, you know? She gives 80% to Gin, he goes up to 140% crit rate or something like that. Mayuri probably raises him to something like 70% crit rate. Then we talk about his ailment damage bonus doesn't need to change, which means I don't need to change my gear. This is how we compound. This is how we sort of decide on who we're pulling. I hope this is all making sense. We're not even counting whatever his bond is going to end up being. We don't know, right? We don't know. And obviously, like I said, some of this stuff is subject to change depending on what they do. I don't trust any leaks, quote unquote. Even though this is official, I don't trust anything until we see it, right? But this is how this stuff compounds. So as far as Mayuri goes, I will sort of tentatively be looking to maybe pull him. And we'll just have to see about Soifon ultimately. Because if Mayuri seems as good as we're looking at, then maybe pulling for Mayuri will be a good choice. Maybe Soifon will be a character we don't end up really duping or looking to dupe. And we'll have to skip the spirit character. Or we'll have to skip Grimjaw and just use the free-to-play character we get during Half Annie. But that's another thing. I made a video talking about, hey, that free-to-play Grimjaw that's coming is really interesting. Because if he ends up being a character who we get dupes in for free, then we start looking at a character who could sort of replace, you know, characters that we're missing, right? If he just ends up being a better thrust character because he gets free-to-play dupes, and you know your Gin doesn't have any dupes in him, then that's one less character you have to pull on, right? One less character you have to worry about interfacing with. It's the same thing with Rangiku, right? Where Rangiku existing and you getting her for boundary 6 for free during that celebration is just one less character you really have to worry about building in the end game, right? One less piece of gear you have to worry about. But yeah, that's all I got to say for now. I hope this makes sense. If you're thinking about pulling for Mayuri, I do think it's a really good idea. I do think that Mayuri presents a very powerful solution, and I do think that Mayuri is going to lessen your gear requirements because there's almost no way Mayuri is gear intensive. You're gonna need ult charge and you're gonna need ailment damage, right? I think I doubt you will need crit rate, crit damage, attack percent, or anything else. I think it'll be ult charge, ailment damage, in the same way that that Kisuke is. You need ult damage and you need crit damage, you need ult charge. I do think that. So yeah, I've been Lone. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to join the club. We all go make it, and peace.